All right. Thanks, everyone. I hope you have been having a great conference so far. We're trying to wrap up with a panel discussion mainly about the Git community and how to ensure it is and stays healthy. Thanks for submitting questions. I have them here. I'll be asking the panelists each one question, or I'll decide who gets which. And then maybe there will be follow-up answers from other panelists. We'll see how it goes. I'm Toon. I work at GitLab. I was voluntold to host this panel discussion. And with me is Emily from Google. We have Danny from GarrettForge, Patrick and Kartik from GitLab. You can read more about their career and how they are involved in Git on the slide, but let's just jump into the questions. First one, Kartik, if you don't mind. What is Git doing to attract new contributors, and is it working?
That's a good question. I think to think about new contributors, we need to think about, I think there was a talk by Nick from GitLab yesterday, talking about what enables people to contribute to open source repositories. So we need to think of two kinds of people. People who are intrinsically motivated to contribute to something because they like it, because they like working on code, they like seeing the changes land. And for those kind of people, it's a little easier for the Git project because however we see it, Git project is a bit hard to contribute to. There is a little bit of a starting problem which most people face with contributing to Git. But for people who are intrinsically motivated, this gets easier because they see this as a challenge they want to conquer. So for those kind of people, it's more about reaching out and making the word spread about what Git is, about how Git is doing new things, and about how they can make Git better. This can be through blog posts, this can be through new changes, or this can be through like the performance optimizations we have talks about. The other kind of people are people who are extrinsically motivated, and there's no difference between these people in the sense that one is better than the other. It's just the different personas we want to target. So for those kind of people, I think we do a lot of mentoring opportunities in Git. One of them is the Google Summer of Code. The other is the Outreachy project. And both of these reach out to contributors who are new to open source. And we kind of help them get on board with contributing to Git. And this helps because this holds a lot of credibility in the market for these kind of contributors, and also monetarily subsidizes their work in some sense. So I think if we focus on these two things, it might make it much easier for new contributors.
You want to add something, Danny?
No, I have follow-up questions. I don't know.
Yeah, sure, go ahead. It's a discussion, so...
Yeah, follow-up questions. I don't know. Stop me if I'm going too long. But I actually don't know how Reachy works, for example. So, like, do you get paid? Do you get...
I will hand that over to Patrick, I think.
I mean, yes. In general, yes. The students that we have for both Google Summer of Code and for Outreachy are actually getting paid for the work that they're doing in this context. Like there is a comparatively long application cycle for people who want to be like part of Outreachy, who want to be part of Google Summer of Code, where they basically first have to like engage with the Git community overall and like do a smaller project, for example, where they contribute like small changes to the Git project, just so that the Git project itself can basically figure out, is that student actually like a good fit for the project overall, and will they likely succeed? But when they're accepted, they do get money for the work that they're doing, and they also get constant mentoring from the mentors, basically. To help them out and get the changes landed. And I think that overall these projects have been quite successful. And like there have been like a bunch of Google Summer of Code students, especially, who have been staying around. I mean, Karthik has been like a Google Summer of Code student in the past, and he's sticked around with the Git community. And there's also other participants for Google Summer of Code who actually sticked around. And that is exactly the thing that we want. Like, we don't only want them to like do a one-term contribution during the Google Summer of Code, but in the best case, they will actually stay around and then maybe also be a mentor in a subsequent Google Summer of Code. That is the dream, basically.
Okay, thank you. Then first question from the audience, Patrick. What is the average time to merge for contributions in the Git project? Can we improve and how?
Well, it strongly depends, I have to say. Like, it strongly depends on many different factors. On the one hand, it's like, how big are the changes that you're actually contributing and how well polished are they from the get-go? On the other hand, I also have to admit that it's a little bit of a question of how much of a good standing do you already have in the Git community. And if you have a better understanding of or better standing in the Git community, then it's going to be faster to merge or to get anything merged. Overall, it can go from 1 week to 11 years, I would say. The medium time, though, probably you should like take like a month into account for like medium-sized patch series to land, but especially like if it's the first time contribution and it's a little bit on the bigger side, especially like, for example, Google Summer of Code, there have been students where it took like 2 or 3 months until something finally settles. But it also depends on like whether you're actually designing something new, like for example, a new command, there is like a whole lot more scrutiny on that compared to just, for example, contributing a documentation fix. So it depends, but typically you can expect like 1 or 2 months maybe.
Why did you turn my mic off, Danny? So I think part of the problem with this question is that we actually don't know. Like I think that's Patrick's like gut feeling. And that pretty much aligns with my gut feeling, but we're not measuring it anywhere. And I really want to. I really think that we should be paying attention to it and see if we can slice it up by like per number of patches, how many iterations does it usually take? Per number of patches, like what's the wall clock time? How many reviewers do we typically see involved? Like that kind of stuff. I think that would really help us understand, because I kind of have the feeling that it's worse than we think it is, and we just we're not noticing. So I would really like to, I actually, one of my goals for this year is to start measuring it before the end of the year. Don't quote me on that. The measuring metrics in the mailing list is really hard actually, but we might be able to do something just from the, like author date versus commit date or something.
I actually don't think you need to worry as much because, I submitted 3 patches last week, my first 3 patches ever. Tiny, but they all got merged within the week. So yeah, not too bad.
Like regarding measuring things, like we already do measure a couple of things at GitLab, like, but only really like basic stuff is basically what we measure. Is things like how many patches are getting sent to the mailing list in general, like who is contributing what, which company is typically contributing which part, also so that I can show like upper management what the part is that we actually contribute, of course, to things, because, well, that's how you get the money eventually. But there's also like we have, of course, AI that is basically analyzing the patches a little bit to like classify them into what kinds of patches are typically sent to the mailing list. So that also like it already starts measuring some parts of the Git community, but overall, like, yeah, time to merge is definitely something where I always go like, yeah, this is also something that I want to do. But parsing mails and all that stuff is also not really the easiest thing to do. And that's probably also part of the problem. Like, we don't use GitHub, we don't use GitLab for development, but we only use a Git mailing list, and that is not always easy and accessible. Eventually you get the hang of it and you really start to like it, but that definitely doesn't really help new contributors, I would say.
All right, thank you. Danny, next question for you. Attracting new contributors is only half of the story. How can Git make sure people stay and feel welcome to keep contributing?
So, well, I did my first 3 patches the other day, and I have to say everybody was very nice, and I felt welcome. So that's a good start. I think like that's a great question. You were saying about being paid is one part of the job. Like if you're contributing and you're getting paid, then I'll hang around, right? Not saying that's the main reason people do it, but that's definitely one way of keeping people around. Also, maybe making it like events like this and try to have something a bit more face to face rather than just being unknown people on the mailing list might help. So if you start knowing the people that you're working with, obviously it's going to help you hang around and also feel less intimidated from sending and maybe potentially being judged by people that you've never seen or met. So yeah. More in stuff person is what I would say. I don't know if anybody would
Like one more thing that I also think would be nice to have is like more hackathon style things where just like people from the community can maybe come together, like even people from outside the Git community. But also you have to say that this is not really the easiest thing to organize because, well, it's of course like globally distributed. So there's no one obvious place where to do all those hackathons. But if we had those, I would probably assume that there's also going to be like a bunch of interested folks joining that might not yet be contributing to Git, and it could very much help them to get started, to have direct mentoring, like face-to-face. I would think that this goes a long way.
We kind of tried to do that last year. We wanted to do those meetups, but we never really managed to find an area that has enough density of people really to make it worth. And the problem with Git is that you could have a meetup about Git and 1,000 people show up and then don't even realize that Git is written in C and you can contribute to it, right? Like, so you need to attract the right kind of people to those events as well, which is another challenge.
Like one more challenge that I also noticed as a Google Summer of Code mentor quite a lot is that I have a certain set of opinions and I'm able to guide contributors, of course, into that direction. But that doesn't really mean that my opinion is the correct one. And there is, of course, like still the other people in the Git community, and like I will do a first review of the round and say do it that way. Then the next person comes along and says, but this way is totally stupid, do it that way instead. And then you have like this constantly switching of opinions, and that is also something that is really painful for contributors, like especially new time contributors who don't yet know to navigate discussions like that, and where they don't know yet that they are actually in the position to make a decision right now. And that is also really stressing out the contributors if they don't really know how to do that.
Yeah, I think these all kind of point to one of the, like, sort of in the same direction, that I think the more hands-on help that we can offer to people, whether it's in the form of like being near other people at a hackathon or, you know, talking on Discord, or like somebody noticing that their series is going off the rails and turning into a firefight, like, and like coaching them through that. I think the more person-to-person interaction like that we can do, the better the experience is for contributors. And I think we just need to figure out how to be better at noticing that.
All right, thanks. Emily, what type of non-technical contributors should we attract, and can we benefit from attracting to the community?
Tech writers. I mean, so many, right? So non-technical contributions are kind of a hot button thing at conferences like this Open Source Summit, which I don't know how many people attended the rest of the week. But, you know, so we had talks from designers and writers and salespeople and all kinds of roles that you can have in an open source project without necessarily writing code. And I think that Git can really benefit from a lot of those. So I said tech writers immediately off the bat. The Git documentation is an exciting place. I don't know if people have seen the like auto-generated Git man page thing on the internet, like that it just makes up something and this is pre-LLM. This is like a 15-year-old like joke website. That's a signal for us that we should have listened to. But like, for example, Julia Evans, if people know Bork online, she's actually contributing to our documentation right now. I'm like kind of fangirling about it. But I would love to have a tech writer with enough time to actually like really overhaul the Git docs and make sure that they make sense and they're coherent and they're not redundant and like not too much information in a giant wall, all of this stuff. I think it would really help. I also think that we could really benefit from UX design in terms of CLI. So I don't know if people have used the GH CLI tool for GitHub. I was really, really impressed by the UX design for that. I was trying actually to track down the company that GitHub used to write that, because I think they used a contractor. I don't know who, but I want to hire them really bad for Git, right? Like the way that checkouts UX works is a travesty. And I wish that we could use a UX designer and really like start to build some better flows. We have some stuff like Git switch and Git restore, which are much nicer. But just to keep going down that path, so we have a user experience that's actually composed and intentional, instead of a user experience that's like, oh, I needed to add this feature, so here's a new flag, you know, like randomly somewhere.
Okay.
Just as a follow-up.
Somebody has to go.
Oh, sorry. I'm also loud.
Recording.
Sorry.
It's for you
Taking
too.
Q&A? Or can I throw something out? I'm curious because you brought up switch and restore and documentation and stuff. Like, because Git is so like backward compatible, like focused, which I think is really good. When you add stuff like switch and restore, or like I blame myself for a very early version of this, which is like git add -- staged. I put in and I regretted it, right? Because I'm like, oh, this will make things easier, but now there's more ways to do the same thing, and the documentation only becomes more complex, right? Because now you have checkout, which does all these things, and you have switch and restore, which also does strangely overlapping things, where then the flags to them are slightly different to do the same thing, right? If you do -a or whatever. So I'm just curious what you guys think. Like, do you think adding stuff like switch and restore in order to help improve UX, knowing that we can't really remove the stuff that it makes redundant, improves things or makes things more confusing for new users?
I think Patrick wants to.
So I think it strongly depends. Like, yeah, as you said, I don't really think that it's an option to, for example, in this case, remove git checkout eventually, because it's used all over the place. Like all scripts out there will use it, so it's not an option to remove it. But I think eventually we should start revamping our documentation and basically stop mentioning git checkout everywhere and just not mention it at all anymore, so that people are not able to discover it. And the man page itself for git checkout should, of course, continue to exist, but it should have a big disclaimer: do not use this. And instead, there's now new replacements which are a little bit better than, like, I wouldn't say way better, but it's at least like splitting up concerns a little bit. But I think that is like really mostly about the documentation and adjusting it. There's also like a couple of other commands where we're trying to consolidate features into more focused top level commands. And here the goal would also eventually be to just like hide away the old commands, but not really remove them. But maybe something like Git 4.0. I mean, currently we're trying to like plan out Git 3.0, which is maybe
8.5 years from now.
Currently our major release schedule is like once per decade. So maybe next year roundabout we could have Git 3.0. And so in 11 years, we might be talking again about deprecating a couple of the older commands.
The most predicted. I mean, before that, should we? Oh God, no. Before that, should we start putting some like notices in these commands to say, hey, you're using this thing, but there's a new modern alternative to help instruct users simply through like the output of those commands?
So I think it's difficult for the same reason that it's difficult for us to change the command's behavior in the first place. So Git has this concept of plumbing commands that you're supposed to script against and porcelain commands that a human is supposed to use. But when it comes to like people actually just scripting, they literally just they're like, I usually run git status, git add, git push. So I'm going to put all of that in my script. That's all porcelain commands that you're not supposed to be scripting against, but we've published it. So now it's the API that we have to honor, right? And so if we start inserting random like text into that, it gets a little tricky. I think we have a little bit of an out with like using standard error for human readable versus standard in for machine readable.
Kind of, yeah.
That even confuses a lot of humans. Like I think we've gotten a couple hate mails to the list about that, but it helps to an extent. Yeah.
Like there actually are commands that we're currently phasing out. Like, who's ever heard about git what changed?
A lot of people on the list, apparently.
Okay, except for you. But like mostly nobody in this room has ever heard about git what changed or what it actually does. And I mean, I didn't know about it myself, and I've been contributing to Git for 10 years by now, and I didn't know that command. But surprisingly, like we now started to deprecate it and phase it out because there is an obvious replacement for it as well, which is git log -- raw. And so what we did is to basically start saying, yeah, you cannot execute this command anymore, but if you really want to do it, please add the I still use this flag to this command and send an email to the Git mailing list. And you would be surprised. There's actually a bunch of emails where people have been really upset that we actually want to deprecate this command. So even esoteric commands like this are still in use out there due to whatever reason. But I mean, that's probably part of Git like being used like by millions and millions of developers. There's always going to be that weird one user who is actually using a specific feature.
Everybody still uses their spacebar heater, basically. Yeah.
Okay, Danny, talking about the future, what do you think is a good reason for Git 3.0 to release? Like, how much should there be new? Should it be breaking? Or what is basically the future you envision for 3.0?
For Git 3.0. What? And you picked me? Well, all right. Well, I'm going to pass this off to Patrick, actually.
Nobody wants it.
So, I mean, there's like, I'm actually the one who started the Git 3.0 document. So we do have a breaking changes document now in the Git project, which is already listing out a couple of things that will change. One part, which I've already been talking about today, is RevTable backend, which is going to become the default. It still kind of hinges on the ecosystem to catch up, so we're not going to release it with RevTable by default if nobody's able to speak it. So that is one bigger change. There's also one other big change, which is switching to SHA-256 by default for the object format. Like, as you probably know, like currently we use SHA-1 in Git to like hash objects, and that's also what the derived object names actually are. But SHA-1 is, well, kind of broken by now, and it's probably only going to get even more broken. So switching over to SHA-56 before it's like completely broken and actually becomes like a huge security liability is also something that is very much in for Git 3.0. Well, Git what changed? It's deprecated. It's going to be removed in Git 3.0, but maybe the current discussion might actually change it. I have no idea. Other than that, go ahead.
Sorry, I've got more questions. I've got answers. No, but so clearly we've got BAT now as a new CLI tool. We've got JJ that's obviously gaining a lot of traction. So is there something that we can learn from these tools? That you've started writing Git history, of course. So is there anything that we can learn from this new tools that we can incorporate into Git and maybe make it available in 3.0, maybe with a UX redesign of the CLI?
I mean, there's not going to be a redesign of the CLI because all existing commands will continue to exist. So the only thing that we can basically do is tack on more stuff that maybe works a little bit better compared to the old stuff. And yes, you mentioned Git history, like it's one of the things that I'm currently trying to do because I also used JJ and I almost had a midlife crisis because it felt like it was so much better in the UI compared to Git. And I was like, yep, they certainly know what they're doing. So I'm currently trying to basically backforward a couple of the features that I found were actually quite nice. So with Git history, you basically have like easier ways to edit your history without doing stuff like git rebase - into active, which is a very nice tool if you're like a Git expert. But if you're not, like if you're like a newbie in Git, then git rebase interactive is maybe not really the easiest thing to use. So with Git history, you can basically just like say, Git history drop to remove a specific commit, Git history reword to reword one, or Git history split to split up a commit. And these are features that are directly inspired by JJ, but this is not really anything that requires a major version because, well, we just add new features. So it doesn't really need, or it doesn't really have any breaking changes as part of it.
Right. Next one, Kartik. What fundamental axiom of Git would you change to improve the performance? For example, an object can become unreferenced at any time.
I need to really think for that one.
Yeah, I got it from the audience, so I feel obliged to ask.
Give me a minute. If someone else has a point, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, maybe it's not a performance change, but I would like to change the commit object layout, right? So we have some problems with the author name. So the author name becomes in plain text. It's sort of ensconced for time. You can't change it ever. This is a problem. People change their names through their lives, like for lots of different reasons. That's something that the Git project has really caught a lot of flack from over especially the last 5 years. And we also see a lot of people who are writing code together and want to give equal credit to everybody who worked on the code. And that's not something that the commit object format really supports. So I'd love to be able to change that. I don't know if that really fits the prompt, but there you go.
Are we speaking hypothetical? Like,
Yeah.
because I wouldn't want to work on that, but like one of the things that is really problematic right now is how objects are stored in the first place. Like, every single object has a header, and that header does not only encode the object type, but it also encodes the object size. And that is a huge problem because it means that you cannot stream an object into the object database because you first have to soak the whole object up into memory before you know about the size. And the size is actually part of like the hashed object. So that is a huge problem in the current design. And it's not really something that we can change. So I wouldn't want to work on it, but would have been nice if somebody thought about that before committing to it.
One talk that was really interesting at last year's Git merge was like Git tries to put everything in one single massive file, right? And how big of a repository can you make before you can't handle anymore, right? And so the meta talk was quite interesting. They're trying to essentially do exactly the opposite and use an actual database and put each object in a database. And so like scomponing distracting the object in as many parts as possible, really.
Yeah, so that's in fact something that we're currently working on at GitLab. So we already it's already the possibility that you can swap out reference backends in Git, but we want to make it a possibility to also switch out the object backend. So we currently have like something going on the mailing list, which is called pluggable object databases, where we're currently basically redesigning how Git writes and reads objects so that we have like a central layer so that all reads and writes go through that layer. And eventually the goal is to make it possible to swap out completely how the objects are stored on disk with a database, for example, or something like that, which is going to be a lot of work. I mean, we've probably already landed like 10, 15 patch series with like 100, 200 commits into that direction. And we are still not even close to actually getting it landed overall. So it's probably going to take a couple more years until we are finally there, but it's at least something that we're working on.
Because you might have some penalties when you're writing the object, but then when you're reading it, you've got some massive benefits. And as Luca was saying, that's like 95% of the traffic on a Git server anyway. So,
Okay, Emily, I apologize for asking this question. How do you feel about monorepos versus submodules?
I see why you picked me. People might not remember that I gave a talk about submodules like 2 years ago? At this one, I guess. So 3 years ago. I think that they're for different things. And I think that there's a fundamental misunderstanding in a lot of eng-prod teams about what those different things are. So at Google, we use submodules for scaling. We use submodules really famously for the Android project. The internal Android project is significantly larger than the Android open source project. Painful, right? We use submodules a lot there, very heavily, pretty much exclusively because Android is too large for a single repository to be it's not performant. I actually think that's kind of a crappy reason to use submodules. Okay, fire me, Sundar. I don't think we're doing it right. I think that monorepos have some interesting benefits. I think that the benefits that you get from submodules are really different. So for me, the benefit from submodules is that everybody can, multiple projects can rely on a single dependency, and they can all really easily contribute to that dependency and also upgrade their part of the code that relies on it at the same time. So they want to add an API surface, they also have to use that new API. They can coordinate those things. I think that's really cool. And it also doesn't break, Cardic's project that's using the same API, but doesn't need to be upgraded at the same time like you would need to in a monorepo. So I think it's really useful for that kind of shared project, cross-project coordination stuff. I don't think that we use it enough for that for whatever reason. But some of those things you can get around with a good package manager. Not all languages have good package managers, like C99, for example. I don't know anybody who still uses C99 except the Git project.
I mean, we're allowed to use booleans now.
I know, it's awesome.
Okay, Danny, next one. As we all know, I guess, here in the room, or I hope, that Git turned 20 this year. Do you expect Git to exist for another 20 years?
That's a great question. And I guess it goes back to all of these new tools existing. My answer is yes, because it's now so entrenched in everyday life that I would be very surprised if all of these companies actually manage to migrate away from Git in 20 years, which is not really that long of an amount of time. But also, I don't know, everything can happen, right? So JJ is getting really, really good traction. But ultimately, yes, I expect it to still be here in 20 years.
But is it in the form as now, or will tools like JJ take over, even maybe keeping Git as the data access layer or
Well,
data
best
storage.
case scenario, they make us be better. Like we'll get from JJ, we'll get from other tools, and yeah, we'll keep improving and hopefully stay ahead of the game. But yeah, I guess we need to work at it.
I would like to add that, I mean, I agree to everything you're saying, but it's also time to realize that there are tools out there and to learn from them and to move with them. I think the Git ecosystem and Git itself should really focus on making things better. Otherwise, we will see things take over before we know it.
Okay, Patrick, Git is very powerful and you can do a lot of things with it, making it not really opinionated about how you use it. Is it a mistake that Git was built this way? Should Git be more opinionated in the future, or how do you think about that?
I don't really think that it is a mistake because, I mean, you can see like it has been built that way for a very long time and it was very successful exactly because it is very unopinionated. You can do a lot of stuff as long as you don't put binary files in there. That is maybe some of the things where I would think this is something for improvement for the future. But other than that, you have a lot of wiggle room for how exactly you want to like have a strategy in a specific repository, or also for how every single developer actually works. And I think that this is a huge benefit because everyone will have different workflows. Everyone also wants to work differently because everyone has like basically their own specific personalized stuff that they really like. And overall, it's a strength. But there's still a place for also having opinionated tools. Like that is basically what JJ brings to the table. Like JJ is extremely opinionated, and that's why there are a lot of people out there who really like it. And that is certainly something like I rather see it like an addition to the Git ecosystem because underlying to JJ, it's still like a Git repository. Yes, there's also like a Google something.
Yeah, and it has extension space for more backends if you want to make it work with Mercurial or whatever you want. But yes.
Yeah, but for now, I rather see it like a fancy opinionated Git client that is doing some things better, but is also restricting you in other ways. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but I think overall it was a good design decision to not make it, like not force you down a certain road.
Okay, Kartik. Commit messages are sometimes undervalued by many developers. What can Git or the ecosystem or the community do to make them more used in a better way?
That's a good question because I think coming from the Git project, commit messages are really, really valid there. Like I think one of the biggest feedbacks you get on reviews of the Git mailing list is mostly on your commit message. Not on your code, not on like what you're doing, but mostly on your commit message. And that's important because the commit message is your intention of why you're making this change. It's not about what you're doing, but rather how or why you're doing it. And it holds a lot of value because if you go back in history and look at commit messages, and you can see all this context that why things were made this way. So in that sense, I really think it's important. But I also acknowledge that a lot of developers and flows are out there which do not pay emphasis to the commit message. And in my opinionated way, I think it's important, but making it more useful for other people, I think it's a lot of opinionated way. I mean, it would be my opinion on it. So I don't think I'd enforce that in some sense.
Like one of the things that I also think a lot of people miss is that commit messages are not only to basically explain to future somebody what actually happened, like even if it's future self. But one of the things that I use commit messages myself for is to basically double check whether I understand the changes that I'm currently doing. Because in a lot of situations, I just like hack away on something, it kind of works. Then I start writing the commit message and I go like, oh yeah, where does it actually work? I don't really understand the code that I wrote. It like tests show it works, but I should probably double check so that I can properly explain what I actually did. So the commit message is basically what proves to myself that this is a sane change and a change that I can actually also understand and sell to other people. And that is, I think, something that is kind of undervalued and something that people should use more as a tool to also grow better themselves.
Yeah, I think also one thing that people forget a lot is that having good commit messages that stand by themselves and that aren't just a pointer to some other website are like your best chance for avoiding lock-in. So like if your entire commit history is like, oh, just look at #1234, that assumes that you're going to stay on GitHub for the rest of your life. Maybe that's not always a great assumption, right? Like who knows what the future holds. So I think that's kind of an undervalued part of the commit message too. Like this is a really popular topic. We all have something to say.
Sorry, yeah, I'll try and keep it brief. But do you guys use GitLab yourself to run your code?
Yeah, I mean, so most of our work is upstream first. I mean, all of our work is upstream first. So the policy is we always contribute upstream.
So that wasn't the question, by the way. What I wanted to get to.
Yeah, I'm getting there. But we use GitLab to push our work and run the CI/CD pipelines on them. We also use GitLab to track our work in the sense of issues that we want to work on.
So you use it?
Yes.
And when you're using GitLab, do you find yourself paying attention to the commit message or the merge request description?
Good question. When we're working within the Git team, we mostly focus on the commit messages.
In the
Git team.
In the Git team, but we know
what
what
we're leading to is that basically the per commit review on both GitLab, GitHub, and like for just like this is not really the best experience, and that is
it's not the best. It's just not. It's just by design doesn't value the commit message.
I would actually kind of disagree because nowadays you can do per commit reviews, at least on GitLab. I don't actually know about GitHub, but you can do per review commits reviews. It's still not a great experience. I definitely admit that. But you can just like click through the changes one by one, and you can also like do your reviews per commit. And then you also see that actually like this specific comment was made on that commit, which makes it a little bit easier. But one of the things that I'm still missing, for example, is to also criticize the commit message itself, because I mean, that's what we do in the Git project all the time. So I also want to do that in GitLab itself. But until now, that hasn't happened yet. And I was unsuccessful in actually pushing for that future. But
yeah, I guess
maybe eventually.
Yeah, I guess by design, some forges don't really allow you to do that and don't put attention to it, so people don't pay attention to it. Yeah.
I mean, not everything is Garrett.
We could only be so lucky.
All right, that's it for me. I'm not sure if there are more questions for the audience.
No, I wanted to double down on that a little bit because I find it really, I blame myself to a large degree of the death of the commit message because GitHub doesn't value it, right? Like it's not part of the review process. So like you can't get work into core Git without writing a good commit message. Like it will never be accepted. You can 100% get shit into any project that we're working on at GitHub or GitLab because they have the same review process, and it doesn't even involve the commit message, right? Like it doesn't need to. You can completely not even look at the lines of the commits. You look at the PR description, MR description, and you merge it in, and you look at the code, right? But the review is not based on that. Garrett probably has great commit messages because it is important for part of the review process, right? And so I feel like this is something that GitLab or GitHub could help with, of having a review process that values the commit message as part of review, right? But as long as that these systems and this methodology is how most people contribute and collaborate with each other, then the commit message is not going to be valuable because it's not valuable to get work into the project, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. So first, that I raised this issue in the GitHub issue tracker around 13 years ago.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It's not. No, sorry. You created GitHub. Sorry. Sure. But the point is that you guys work, okay, not at GitHub anymore, but Git Butler and GitLab. So you can make it happen, right? Because it's your code. You can do it. You have absolutely the power to advocate for it. You have examples that make sense. And you actually drive millions of companies and developers, and those will be the future contributors. So the point is, if we want to attract good contributors that value the commit message, we need to provide them with tools that value the commit message. So I believe from that point of view, you have a kind of ethical responsibility of going to your manager and say, you know that ticket that Italian that lives in the UK raised 12 years ago? Can you just bump up a little bit the priority? On Git code review on the other side, right, it was valid from day one because Gerrit functionality is not driven by product managers, it's driven by the people that are using Gerrit. So if we value a commit message, we give a lot of value to it. For instance, there was a very good feature that actually was introduced by GitHub, thank you. There was the ability to suggest, say, some fixes, right? Because you should change the code here, you should change the code there. Just do the damn thing, right? Propose me some changes. And then, of course, Gerrit brought it also to the commit message by saying, can you please fix this typo? No, just keep directly the fixes. And that was introduced not by driven by any product manager in Google, but by people that were using Gerrit. They were saying, why don't we allow, let's say, suggesting fixes on the commit message? We just did, right? So because you are, let's say, also not just developers, but also with a senior position to your companies, can you please bump up those practicals?
I hate to tell you, Luca, but there was a product manager at Google involved in that change.
And actually,
This was sold as it wasn't.
like, I'm trying to push that. I've already tried multiple times to push for it, but like, honestly, I'm not myself going to do that change because I have bigger fish to fry in Git itself, and that is already taking a lot of political effort to actually get that landed. And also, I mean, to spin it the other way around, GitLab is open source. It can also be contributed. So
Yeah, but GitLab doesn't have to accept our contribution, right?
Yeah.
they don't have to, but
Has
if they're-
anybody tried?
If and no, not yet.
Are you sure?
I wanted to, sorry. Just real fast. I do think because since we're talking about like contributing to core Git and stuff, the other problem with this is even if GitLab or GitHub or whoever comes out with like a patch-based review system or something that is saying, okay, here's each commit and the commit messages and kind of try to encourage a workflow more like the Git mailing list, for example, right, where the messages are important. The problem is the Git tooling is not good at doing that, right? It's not good at amending commits history will probably make this easier, right? But like the tooling's not there for most people will be lost. If you force push a commit, right? Or like a change series and somebody else has pulled it down and done something on top of that, that person is completely fucked, right? It is so hard to like get those sort of rebase changes, like integrated your one or two commits that you did on top of that, or you split a commit or whatever, right? Like none of that tooling is in core Git. And so even if you do it, like the Git mailing list can do it because you guys are all really good at rebasing, right? And like kind of figuring out how to deal with circumstances like that and seeing multiple versions of patch series and doing range diff and stuff like that. But like none of that tooling is very good. So I mean, this is the other kind of problem. Like Gerrit kind of solves this by kind of restricting what you really can do, right? In a way that kind of simplifies things. But everybody like this started with, do you like the commit message, right? But like there's a fundamental problem in just allowing people to do these types of workflows that I do think are important, but are hard to do, right?
Even if you're using Gerrit, you still have the problems that you're exactly saying. Like from the client side, it's not easy to like make it work. It's still like I still need to work on it a bit. I can do it, but it's not native. Like JJ would probably solve that a bit. Sorry.
I was just gonna say maybe you should try JJ. Yeah, but like I think this is one of the things that we would want to adopt from JJ, right? Like that was so JJ is coming from Google. It's an open source project. Anybody can contribute to it, but it was written by a Googler in the beginning. And one of the long-term goals that Google has had for JJ is that JJ should not be like replacing Git necessarily, even if we do use it ourselves internally, but it should be instructing Git, and Git should be able to say like, oh, we tried this experimental flow in JJ and here's what worked well or poorly about it. Now we have some data about that particular workflow. Let's put it into Git because we know it works well.
I mean, I think a huge part of the problem is also that people tend to think that stuff in the Git in the Git community is organized, or that anybody actually has a vision. Typically, that is not really the case. Like, it's typically just like some random dude who actually does have an idea, and then we just try it. And that is basically also a little bit of an issue because we don't have a project manager or anything like that.
Right, bring it back to the non-technical contribution.
Exactly, yes.
Like if we did have a product manager or something like that who could
potentially
try and
help.
get the...
Even though I think like it would only solve part of the problem because it's still eventually like an open source community. So, of course, everyone is basically scratching their own niches all the time. I mean, I'm trying by now to push a little bit into certain directions to address like parts of the issues that you're talking about. And I'm also trying to learn from JJ. Now, I guess I also have to try learning from Butterup. And so there's certainly things to improve in Git.
Right. Do we have time for one more question, or is it a wrap?
I think we were supposed to stop at 12:50, and it's 12:51. So
Any more questions from the audience then? If you have any.
comments from the audience.
Long rambling
Complaints, yeah.
Scott's really good at those.
We've got lots of complaints. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.